I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Greg Hogan. I'm with the OSU Environmental Health and Safety Department. Today we're going to talk about personal protective equipment. There's a few things we're going to review as personal protective equipment standards. We also cover the hierarchy of controls, cover just a little bit about what a job hazard analysis is, or a JHA, discuss various types of protection, and the other thing too is employer and employee responsibilities. On the screen there in front of you, it talks about different types of standards. You can go to OSHA.gov, go into 29 CFR 1910. The 1910.133 talks about your eye and your face personal protective equipment. The 1910.134 talks about respiratory. As you go to the next one, we're talking about the head protections. 1910.135 for foot protections, 1910.136. For electrical hazards, as far as the PPE requirements, actually falls under the 1910.137. The hand protection falls underneath 1910.138. And the hearing protection or ear protection is 1910.195. Three basic elements as far as PPE standard is concerned. The first one has to be what they call a job hazard analysis. The second thing is selecting the appropriate PPE. And the third thing that's involved with the OSHA standard involves the use of training the employees. The employees have to be trained. If you look at the hierarchy control real carefully, if you notice at the very top, you want to try to eliminate the hazard the best you possibly can. If you can't eliminate it, you want to try to substitute it with maybe a different type of a process. You can also use engineering controls. All engineering controls is you just isolate the people away from the hazard. The administrative controls, basically you change the way the people work. And the last but not least is the PPE, protect the worker with personal protective equipment. People always wonder, well, why in the world is the PPE the very last one? Well, let's face it, we want to try to eliminate, substitute, engineer the process out, or use administrative controls before you have to put a person into personal protective equipment. Here's just kind of a breakdown as far as the hierarchy control measures table. Once again, we're going to try to eliminate the hazard. If this isn't practical, then of course you're going to try to substitute the process with something of less of a risk. If you cannot, once again, it does not very become practical, you can always isolate the hazard. And if you're going along, well, that's not going to work. Let's go to engineering controls. The engineering controls doesn't seem to be working for what you're needing. Try administrative controls. That'll be your next option. And of course, the very last one is your PPE. Let's go to the other part. The job hazard analysis basically is the JHA is a technique used to identify the dangers of a specific job task in order to basically reduce the risk of injury to workers. If you have 10 tasks being performed in a laboratory, for an example, you always start with what you feel is the most hazardous. And once again, one of the things that I cannot stress enough is get your employees involved and break the jobs down into small steps. Identify the hazards for each step that you've broke that job down into. And then once the steps have been identified, can you go through and eliminate or reduce the hazards? And then once again, go back over and do a thorough review of your job hazard analysis, which you just performed for that particular job task. Do a walkthrough. Once again, survey the areas in question. And here's the purpose of that. Basically is identify the hazards to not only the workers and also to the co-workers. Consider the following. That particular area where the person's working in, is there any type of an impact? Is there any type of penetration? Is there going to be any type of compression or any type of rollover, for an example? What about the radiation as far as optical lighting is concerned? The heat, the chemicals, the harmful dust. These are all things to consider during the job hazard analysis. Here at Oklahoma State University, we do have a form that you can actually follow off of, kind of fill this out as you go, make it as simple as you possibly can. At the very top of the form, once again, it talks about identifying the task, just like you see here. In other words, what's the job this person is going to be doing? And then, of course, to come down to the next part, what kind of tools are we going to be using? And then over here, they have a priority ranking. Basically talks about severity, critical, marginal, negligible, and any probability. Once again, the severity gives you a numbers. The probability actually uses a alphabetical system. The severity, once again, is the probability and the priority ranking. So once again, you go through and you figure out what that particular job is, what's the first step for that particular job, what's the hazards, what's the priority rating, is it 1 through 4, and how you controls. What kind of controls are in place? Is it engineering, administrative, or is it PPE? And then once again, what's the safe procedure? Make sure you do put the date in the page of. I know this particular page, this particular form right here only shows 8 steps. You can always add an additional layer, another additional form to this particular document, and continue right on to ever how many steps that you deem is necessary for the type of job that you're doing the JHA for. Who's it going to be developed by? Who's the person actually come up with this? Who's going to review it? And also who's going to be revised by? And who's actually going to make the final approval for this particular job hazard analysis within your workplace? Some of the hazards the staff might encounter includes eyes. Once again, it could be a liquid, it could be a vapor, it could be a mist, it could be a gas, or it could be a dust. The feet, is there a potential chance that the feet could actually be have something strike the feet, something roll over, crush the foot, or better than that, maybe something puncture the bottom of the foot. Good example, maybe a nail or even a screw. And what are the chemicals that they're going to be working around? Unknown liquids. Once again, what kind of foot protection do we need to provide our employees? And then look at the hands. The materials that you're actually working with, are they going to cause a scrape, a bruise, a cut? Or maybe they're going to involve some type of chemicals. The head, of course, is the other part to kind of remember on this. And what we're looking for here is anything that has an overhead or a side impact. As far as the head, the other thing too is maybe loud noises. This kind of gets into hearing protection in that particular area as well. Then, of course, you go right over to the next part. They talk about respiratory protection. In other words, is it vapor, mist, gas, dust? Something that you can physically breathe in and get directly into the respiratory tract for that particular employee. And then once again, the body. We're talking about body protection there as well. Or we're talking about particulates. Remember, particulates a lot of times may be your dust, large particulates or even small particulates, but then it could also be chemicals. And is there anything else that you need to consider that those staff members are going to be exposed to in that particular area? So that's something else to kind of go back and look at. What are your staff employees going to be encountering in the job that they're assigned to do? Let's talk first about eye protection, eye and face protection. Any type of eye protection should have what they call the ANSI, the Z87.1-2015. This is actually from the being marked or documented on the side of the temple, on the inside of the safety glasses. The other thing, too, that you will find out there is they're going to protect against impacts, dust, splash, or even UV radiation. And then once again, is there going to be safety glasses with side shields? That'd be another thing to kind of look at. Remember, safety glasses are designed for an impact. Goggles are going to be for, a good example of that may be large particulates, or it may actually be used for chemicals. The face shield is secondary means of eye protection. So in other words, you'll have safety glasses on, or you could have a chemical goggles, or you could have a workshop or wood shop goggles on. And that's where the face shield actually acts as a secondary means of protection. Another thing, too, is welding masks. That's something a lot of people don't realize actually falls under the eye and face protection far as OSHA is concerned on the personal protective equipment for the eye and the facial area. Some safety concerns as far as eyes are concerned occurs in all types, occur at the rate of about 2,000 per day. That's right here in the United States. 10 to 20% of those injuries resulted in temporary or permanent vision loss. You take a group of 5 people, you take 3 of those out who receive sustainable eye injuries were not wearing eye protection. Okay, it's provided to the employee free of charge. It is available, and it's up to the employee to actually wear the assigned eye protection that the department does recommend for that particular job task. Causes of eye injuries also conclude from the BLS, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, found that 70% of the eye injuries were caused by flying debris or falling objects. Okay, that's another one they have put in there. It can also be contact with chemicals. That's one that a lot of people don't give too much about until they actually come in contact. I'll tell you one good example that some people don't give too much thought about is they'll take the time to put on the sunscreen, which is once again going to be an SPF of 15 or higher. Usually they'll lather it up, they put it on their hands, and they'll start lathering the sunscreen onto their body. And they never wash their hands after they get through lathering the sunscreen on. Their eyes become where they're having to get kind of itchy, so they start scratching their eyes with their fingers that they've already used to apply the sunscreen with, and they start to have a burning sensation. Well, essentially what you've done is you've taken the sunscreen from the fingers or the hands and actually just rubbed it directly into the eye itself, and that's where you get the burning sensation from. You can also get it from misuse of tools, improper guards, poor maintenance, poor safety habits. Those are all of the basics that you will see in a lot of the work environments. Use the appropriate type of personal protective equipment. If you look on the very far left of the screen, this particular picture right here, that'd be a good example of maybe a welding helmet, but also you can use it for what? Eye protection, okay? Because a lot of these things actually lift up, so you can actually use them for eye protection because it comes down, actually has a clear lens right here in front. Here's another pair of what they call impact goggles. And of course, over here on the very far right is an example of safety glasses. There are different types of eye protections out there on the market. The lens can be made out of plastic, polycarbonate, side-shielded safety glasses, the goggles, and of course, last but not least, is a full face shield. One thing that you want to keep in mind with side-shielded safety glasses, if you happen to have prescription safety glasses, just because they say that they are safety glasses, you still have got to make sure that they do include the side shields to them. If they have the side shields to them, that would actually be considered as a means of eye protection as far as impacts would be concerned. Plastic and polycarbonate, the material is very lightweight. It does protect against welding splatter. It's less likely to fog up. Doesn't say it won't fog up. It's just a little bit less likely it won't fog up. But here's the other thing too is they're not very scratch resistant. And let's face it, if you're out there working, the safety glasses are going to get scratched. If they do get scratched so bad you can't see through them, it's time to replace those safety glasses. So once again, you'd contact your supervisor and go through the process within your department. Safety glasses should be side shielded. Shielding provides better protection from flying debris. Remember, safety glasses for what? Impacts. Things will be coming at you towards the eye. It also protects against chemicals, particularly if they may be suspended in air. But that's something you got to be careful with, okay? Just don't rely upon a pair of safety glasses as far as eye protection, because if you get chemicals spilt, and they can actually come right down in the middle of where the forehead area and the top part of this rim of the safety glasses, once again, you're getting chemicals in your eye because it does what? It's not self-sealing. There's no seal factor associated with this part right here. The goggles provide better protection from splashes, liquids, and even dust than safety glasses do. They should fit tightly against your face. They should also provide the best protection against liquid, pesticides, or either other type of toxic chemicals. I do show you two different models right here, two different styles. The chemical goggles, once again, have the four little top hats on each of the four corners, just like you see in this photo right here. When you come over to the safety goggles, these ones that have all the little perforated holes in the very top. And what the perforated holes were designed for is to not allow any type of fogging to take place within the goggles. They don't work very good with chemicals. Don't forget that, because chemicals come through the top. Whereas these little perforated holes that you do find in a pair of safety goggles, those are more or less for your large particulates. Once again, dust, things that's going to be fairly large as far as size is concerned, that may have a potential for entering into the human's eye. Here's an example right here of why eye protection does work. If you look at this individual right here, their eyes are almost perfect. Just by looking at the picture, there you go, well, this looks like chemical burns. Well, they are chemical burns, but here's what I want y'all to look at. Look at the individual's eyes here. They are perfect. There's no burn, there's no scarring, there's no tissue built up on them. How do we know what they were wearing? They were wearing a good pair of what? Chemical goggles. You can actually see the outline of where the goggles were actually resting on that individual's facial area. So always remember that eye protection does work. Just a matter of you taking a few seconds to put it on and make sure you're wearing the correct type of eye protection for the task that you're doing. The face shield, we talked about this earlier. It's typically for flying materials. It is a secondary means of eye protection, and that's something you've got to be very careful with there, because a lot of times things may come up through the bottom and may come in directly from the side. So just because you have a face shield doesn't mean it's 100% going to protect your eyesight. You use it in conjunction with either safety glasses, chemical goggles, or safety goggles that you do have in the workplace. Tips to protect your eyes. Wear goggles and face shields when you're around flying chips or even particles, electrical arc or even sparks, chemicals, vapors, gases, the light, harmful light, bright lights. Good example you could put in maybe from, I don't know, maybe working as far as grinding welds down in a metal shop. Or it could be liquid chemicals. Things can get splashed on the eye, or maybe acids or caustics. The molten metal, the dust, or even swinging objects like ropes and chains. When we're talking about this right here, usually we're talking about some type of an overhead crane system in that particular work environment. Turn containers away from the face when opening. A good example of that would be, and I've actually have seen this happen before, where people open up, let's say, for example, a spray can. They'll go ahead and open it up, and then they try to put that little straw in there that usually comes with a lot of your aerosol cans. And a lot of times people wind up basically is accidentally pushing down on the button of the aerosol can and actually putting the chemical directly into their eyes. Why? Because once again, they have the container facing directly towards themselves. Remove protective eyewear only after turning off the tool. A lot of people get finished doing their job, for example, maybe sharpening a lawnmower blade, for an example. They'll be in there, they get the blade all sharpened up. They're finished, they pull them safety glasses or goggles or face shield off. And once again, that particular electric motor is still turning at a fairly high RPM. Just because you turn the power doesn't necessarily mean it's going to shut off the spinning factor within the tool itself. Outdated or scratched prescription lenses can become distorted. Once again, it will cause some visual issues. Excuse me. If you happen to have any type of distortions. Let's talk about some tips to protect your eyes. Replace cracked, pitted, or damaged goggles or glasses. Concentrate on the task at hand when using the power tools. You've got to pay attention when you're actually using power tools. And the other thing, too, is stop and relax your eyes periodically. Look out at something very far. Bring your vision up very close. Look up, look down, to the left, look to the right, and then focus back on something very far away, and then bring your vision closer in of things you may be able to see. The other thing, too, is be certain that the corrective eyewear is approved for the hazardous environment you're working in. Where does this information derive from? This actually comes from your job hazard analysis. Keep sharp or pointy objects away from the face and also the eyes. It may be simple as maybe a pencil, for an example. It could be a screwdriver, would be another example you could put in. Maybe a pocket knife, maybe a utility knife. Those are all things that are what? Very, very easy to penetrate directly into the skin. So make sure you do try to, if you do have to hand someone an object that has a sharp point to it, hand them the handle first. That way you don't have to worry about you slipping and going forward and actually potentially harming that individual. So please kind of go back and look at that. Keep sharp or even pointed objects away from the face and the eyes. A good example of that may be maybe like a thumb tag. Thumb tack, sorry about that, thumb tack. The other thing, too, is maybe a screwdriver, maybe an X-Acto knife, maybe a utility knife, or even a pocket knife or a razor knife. Keep those directly away from your facial area and your eyes, please. The Z87, as of July the 5th, 1994, all glass must meet the minimum standards set forth by the ANSI standard, the American National Standards Institute. And basically go to Z87 1-2010. If you look at the very little chart that we've kind of put here together, this is all the information you're going to find from ANSI. Variable light filtration, once again, glare reduction. And of course, you got protection from dust, water droplets, or even an impact. So once again, we've covered every one of those issues that you may run across. And also, you can always reference back to the ANSI Z87 if you feel that you need to. What to do in case of an eye injury? First, be familiar with the chemicals that you use and how to treat eye and skin exposures. You need to know where to find the safety data sheets for the chemical in your work environment. Please read up on the chemicals before you use them. Don't wait till you're out there and you have something that goes wrong, and then you're trying to read the safety data sheets. You don't know where it's at, or better than that, maybe you can't see where that particular safety data sheet may be as well. If you do get dust or wood chip or other small particulates in your eye, look down, flush it out with an eye wash solution. Use water if eye wash solution is not available. If you happen to be in the pesticides, herbicides do happen to get into your eye, immediately use a portable eye wash flushing dispenser. Okay. Here's the thing: you've got to get something that you can rinse that chemical out of the eye as quickly as you possibly can. So that right there is something to kind of take note of there. Let's go into our next slide right here. What to do in case of an eye emergency. Flush your eyes with running water for approximately 15 minutes. Have someone call 911. When you do make that initial 911 call, do remember this. Make sure you are as precise as you know of for how to tell them what the physical address is for where the emergency is. Not only that, but you may have to go outside and once again may have to signal them or guide them in to where that particular injury may have occurred at, the emergency response personnel. Have someone call medical attention. I've talked about that. The SDS's, safety data sheets, and the labels will give first aid instructions. They have came a long, long ways. It used to be called material safety data sheets. They gave you some information, but the information they provided is nothing like it is now. Actually, in 2025, the new safety data sheets actually have a lot more information in them than what the old ones did. And they're a lot easier to understand. They're easier to read. And that's one plus side as far as eye protection is concerned. You run across in certain areas, particularly get around laboratory areas or anywhere there's something that potentially, like maybe say chemicals, could get directly into the eyes. The safety equipment needs to be well marked and accessible at all times. Do not put anything in front of an eye wash station, a safety shower. Don't be putting ladders up there or parking chairs in there. It has to be kept clear at all times when the employees are in there doing their job. So in other words, they should be able to physically be able to walk exactly to the eye wash station without creating any type of tripping or any type of falling hazards. The inspection also needs to be done on a weekly basis by the principal investigator. Okay, so that's just some of the basics as far as an eye wash and a safety shower is concerned. If you get water on the floor, don't worry about that. Take care of the employee's needs first, because the other stuff is just cosmetic or things that can be either repaired or it may actually be replaced. So always keep that in mind with your eye wash stations. Let's go to the other part. Hard hats, once again, and foot protection. Let's go to the ANSI Z89. Remember the eye protection was Z87. Now, on the ANSI Z89.1 2009, that actually talks about your what? Your foot and head protection. There are so many different types of head protections out there on the market. Make sure that if you do purchase or you have to be a purchasing agent, that you look to make sure that that personal protective equipment you're buying actually has the ANSI standard attached to it. Because here's the thing, they've already done all their field work. That's the good part of it right there. They've already got it knocked out. Let's go to the other part. At the very bottom of the page, you'll see a gentleman here that actually has a safety helmet on. It's got a strap that comes on both the back of the ear and the front of the ear, and has a chin strap that comes right around the very edge of the chin area itself. You say, what's that so important? Well, this is actually something that's fairly new. They've actually put it out in some of the standards. That's one of the places that you will see it. And the other thing, too, is if for some reason you would fall, it's not the initial fall that causes people damage. It's that secondary impact on whatever they land on. Maybe as simple as maybe a street, it may be in an auditorium. There's all different places where they could actually run across a need for hand and foot protection. The new safety helmets that they have come out with, do remember this, that they are designed to withstand not only a top impact, but also designed to take a side blow or a side impact as far as if they would happen to get hit with something. The other thing, too, is as far as hard hats are concerned, a true hard hat will have a suspension system built into it, just like you see in this picture right here. And there's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches from here to the top of the helmet. And the reason they do that is for some reason a person had an impact. Basically, it would come down and it would deflect or try to throw the object off the best it possibly could. Let's talk about foot protection. Protects against falling and rolling objects. Prevents objects from piercing the shoe. And also must be used when an employee's feet are exposed to electrical hazards. Like I said, folks, we don't make these rules up. This is what we are required to comply with. So just kind of take that to heart. Let's go to the other part. There are so many different types of hand protections that is available that comply with the ANSI standards. Hand protection can prevent skin absorption, even harmful substances, severe cut laceration, severe abrasions, pictures, got chemicals, thermal, and even harmful temperature extremes can also cause damage to the human hands. Okay, let's talk about glove protection or hand protection with gloves. Make sure that whatever gloves you're using is compatible with the type of products that you're going to be dealing with. A good example of that would be wearing a pair of nitrile gloves if you had a job where you had to cut sheet metal or if you had to cut glass all day. Those type of gloves are not going to work for you, folks. There is no way they can work for you. And the reason I mention that is because these nitrile gloves do not hold up very well against some chemicals, and they definitely do not hold up against sharp objects. Because why? They're made out of kind of what they call a nitrile material. They will cut, they will tear fairly easy. A good pair of leather gloves, once again, can actually assist an individual, and particularly if it involves some type of metal, wood. Those are the two big ones that you may find out there where actually wear gloves. The gloves that you see right here on the table is kind of a silver looking one. Those are what they call cut resistant gloves. Didn't say cut proof, just said cut resistant gloves. Does make a big difference. And of course these other gloves over here, you see a lot of mechanics wearing things like this. Not only are they padded on the inside, but they also got little grippers on the outside where the thumb and the fingers are located. So that's something else to kind of go back and look at and make sure the PPE that you're wearing is compatible with what? The type of hazards you're going to be exposed to. Okay? All right, the Force Shield Chemical Protection Guide, we have put one of those on here as well for you. One of the things that you do want to keep in mind, they do list the chemicals over to your very right, to the very left, and then next to that, it's going to have the case number. In section number 3, where it talks about breakthrough time as far as minutes are concerned. And the other thing, too, it's going to talk about, has that particular item been tested? Has it been calculated, or is there a known suspected carcinogen? That's where the Force Shield gloves actually will protect you. The other most important thing is make sure that if you're going to be wearing gloves, you always put 2 pair of gloves on first. That way, if that bottom glove starts absorbing a lot of water and you have to drain it out, you will still have adequate hand protection out there. So once again, that's just a secondary means of protecting your hands. All right, hearing protection. If the decibel exceeds 90 decibels with action levels above 85 decibels, this can be what? Very, very noisy. Log scale sound level doubles with every 5 decibels. 90 decibel is twice the level of what? 85 decibels. A hearing conservation program must contain at least a minimum of these 5 items. As far as greater exposure than 85 decibels must include monitoring. If it's above 85 decibels, they're required to have monitoring provided to the employee free of charge. The other thing too is a good audiometric test. That does make a huge difference. And if you've never taken an audiometric test before, remember this. The first time you go in, it's probably not going to be perfect for you. You're going to be sitting there going, you're going blah, 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 nothing's really happening. But one of the things that you do want to keep in mind as far as the audiometric testing is concerned, that's where you actually go in and they're going to check your sound level. They're going to test for let's say this is your first time to actually have your hearing tested. They're going to use that as your baseline, and then the following year they're going to compare that reading with the year before, and that's where they're going to figure out, is your hearing staying the same, has it decreased, or has it maybe improved just a little bit. That's what you're going to find during your audiometric testing. You also have PPE, or personal protective equipment, within your hearing conservation program. The other thing too is your training and your record keeping will be the other portion to kind of listen to there as well. Talk about your respiratory protection. These are 4 different types of respirators that are out there on the market. OSHA does consider these 4 types respirators as far as the respiratory standard is concerned. If you look at the very far left of the screen, which is going to be this one right here, you will notice that's considered as a half-face respirator. Now, one of the things you want to keep in mind with a half-face respirator is it does not protect your eyes. Works great for dust, but it does not offer any type of protection for what? There's no eye protection associated with it. So once again, that's a half-face respirator there. The one next to it is what they call an N95. N95, N99, or N100. The higher the number, the greater the protection factor is going to be. So let's face it, you at least get a 95% as far as protection factor is concerned. Now, one thing you don't want to do is use these N95s in an area where there's any type of vapor, mist, or gases. What's going to happen? It's going to absorb directly into that type of material that the N95 is designed for. The full-face respirator does offer eye protection. It also protects your eyes, your mouth, and your lungs, and your nose, your respiratory tract. It protects all that. But probably the biggest thing that people don't realize is on those full-face respirators, they do have a curvature built inside of them. So your side peripheral vision may be just a little bit distorted from what it normally would be. If you notice, both on the full face and the half face, they basically use the same style of what they call teardrop cartridges. If you do put new cartridges on the respirator, take you a little magic marker or something that you can scribe onto the filter itself on the date that it was installed on that particular respirator. Okay. The last one we have on the very far right of the screen up here, what they call the PAPR, Powered Air Purifying Respirator. This particular respirator runs off kind of works like a fan running backwards, an oscillating fan that runs backwards. And what essentially does is this particular PAPR actually fits in the lower portion of your back area in your lumbar region, has a belt that's connected to the front that actually will support the battery-powered unit itself. You also have a flexible cord. That's the other thing, too, that works out fairly well. But one thing you want to keep in mind is do not twist or kink that flexible hose that actually runs from the battery power module up to the back of the loose-fitting hood. Or it could be a helmet type of a hood system that they may be using. If you do have one of these, make sure you have a backup battery for it, because you never know when that battery is about to run down. And when it does run down, you don't have any more airflow. Basically what happens is the top of that loose-fitting hood, it is kind of shrinks down and actually loses its contour shape. So once again, remember that about PAPRs. Air purifying, they only cleanse air. They do not increase breathable air, okay? And that's one thing you've got to be careful with, whether it's an N95, N99, or 100. Once again, you've got to take the time to know what your hazard is going to be. The other thing, too, is respirators, they cannot be used in confined space where oxygen deficiency is possible. If you have an oxygen content of 19.5% or lower, that's what they consider as an oxygen deficient atmosphere. If it's 23.5% or above, that's what they consider as an explosive type of an environment. One thing that you do want to keep in mind is if you go into an area that lacks oxygen, that full face, half face, N95, or even the PAPR is not going to provide you with any type of oxygenated air once you enter that particular location. So always kind of remember that. Now, the picture that y'all see directly on your screen there, that's actually what they call an SCBA, self-containing breathing apparatus. Okay, these are designed to be used in what kind of environments? Oxygen deficient atmospheres. Okay, this is breathable air. They maybe have a 30-minute or maybe a 60-minute bottle on the back of them. One of the things you got to be careful with is when you put one of these on, most of the time you're going to gently inhale, and when you do, that face piece is going to collapse around your facial area and provide you with a good sealing factor. Now, the other thing too is you're going to be checking for positive pressure and negative pressure. That's going to be something you're going to be checking for. And basically what it comes down to, you're going to take the palm of your hand, and you will be placing, I'm going to back up just for a second. You'll be placing the palm of your hand right over this little exhalation valve right here. You're going to gently exhale with the respirator on, and that respirator should move just a little bit against the facial area, but it should not break the seal. The next check that you're going to be doing is what they call a positive seal. And this is basically where you take your both hands, you put them directly over the cartridge itself, as far as your respiratory cartridges are concerned. And you're going to do what? You're going to gently inhale. And when you inhale, that respirator should basically draw completely back to your facial area in order to make a good seal. So I did want to kind of briefly mention that as well. As far as concentration outside the respirator to concentration inside, once again, a half face, full face, half face air purifying respirator is about 10. APR, air purifying respirator, full face, about 50. If you notice the PAPR is a full face is about 25. But you get up to the PAPR full face with escape bottle, you get about 30, about 1,000 concentration for that. PAPR full face for absorbing abrasive blasting continuous flows, 1,000 as far as the concentration is concerned, and an SCBA pressure is about 10,000 as far as concentration ratios. Respiratory protection program must have a written program associated with it. Also must have a voluntary use portion in there. Also needs to make note of what kind of protection that the employees are going to be receiving for whatever type of area they're going to be working in. They also require to have a cartridge changeout program. The medical evaluation, that is one that the healthcare provider provides you as the employee. And the other thing, too, that you do want to keep in mind, they're also the one that determines when your next medical evaluation is going to be coming up or when you need to do your next one. Okay. The fit test, that's something that is required by the OSHA Respiratory Protection Regulation 1910.134, specifically states in there that a full face, half face, N95, they will have what? They will have an annual fit test associated with those. The face piece seal, that's the portion that goes around the facial area, basically where the respirator pushes against your facial areas. Make sure you have a good seal in that area there as well. If you don't have a good seal, you're not offering any type of protection. And then the other thing too, is there any cleaning and disinfecting far as a respirator. You need to take the respirator apart. You need to clean it. You need to disinfect it. Let it become either air dry, or you could actually use a lint-free cloth. But you've got to make sure that respirator is thoroughly clean and disinfected before you put it back into a plastic bag. That's where the storage portion comes in. If you do happen to have a respirator that's a full face or a half face, or a popper, you need to make sure that you store it and let it hang in its natural shape, and do not allow anything to fall on top of or lay on top of the mask itself. Because what happens is it changes out of its natural contour, which is basically the shape of your facial features. And make sure that respirator is completely dry before you put it back into a bag, because if you don't, a plastic bag, because if you don't, it's going to sit there, it's going to mold inside of that particular plastic bag. So go back and do some housekeeping, do some cleaning up, do some checking on this stuff. Make sure you thoroughly inspect the respirator before and after each use. Do you need any replacement parts? If you do have to have replacement parts, go back to the same make and model of the respirator that you're assigned to have. And that can all be done through your inspection. Evaluating the program itself, there's been something new added, there's been something taken away. You got to go back and look at your program. Is your program a good respiratory protection program that can withstand all the types of environments you have in your work areas? The training is required on an annual basis. Okay, so just like the fit tests are required on an annual basis. The only thing that is not required on an annual basis is your medical evaluation. Okay, record keeping. Sorry about that. The record keeping aspect of it, is there a system set into place how you can keep track of the records? Who wears the respirator? What kind of respirator? What are they exposed to in the work environment? These are all basic things to kind of go back and observe within your written respiratory protection program. Employers must pay for personal protective equipment. That was as of May 15th of 2008, a new OSHA rule that about employer payment for PPE went into effect, with a few exceptions. OSHA does now require employers to pay for personal protective equipment used to comply with OSHA standards. The final rule does not create new requirements regarding that PPE employers must provide. The standard makes it very clear that employers cannot require workers to provide their own personal protective equipment, and the workers' use of PPE they already own must be completely voluntarily. Whenever a worker provides his or her PPE, the employer must ensure that the PPE or the equipment is the same or is adequate to protect the worker from the hazards within the workplace. Okay, the employer has specific obligations, and so does the employee. The employer basically obligations include performing a hazard assessment or a job hazard analysis, and look at ways to identify and control physical and even health hazards, identify and provide appropriate PPE for employees, train employees in the use and care of your personal protective equipment, maintain PPE, including replacing worn or even damaged personal protective equipment. And the other thing, too, is periodically reviewing, updating, evaluate the effectiveness of the personal protective equipment program that you've created within your organization. Employees have obligations as well. Make sure they're properly wearing the PPE. Attend training sessions on personal protective equipment and care for, clean, maintain PPE, and inform your supervisor any repair or replacement parts or PPE replacement parts that you need. Excuse me. And that happens to be your obligations as an employee is concerned. Wear your PPE like the boss is always watching. It shouldn't be that way, but once again, think about this. It is for your own personal safety when you're looking at your personal protective equipment. The employers must provide and pay for the following. The metatarsal foot protection. That is actually the guard that goes up on top of the foot area. That's what they call a metatarsal guard. Rubber boots with steel toes in them, particularly if you're working in a lot of mud, water, things of that nature. Employers must also provide and pay for PPEs such as non-prescription eye protection, prescription eyewear insert lens for full-face respirators, non-specialty and rubber insulating gloves, goggles and face shields they're required to pay for. All your firefighting gear, the employer is required to pay for that. Same with your hard hats. Your hearing protection, they have to pay for that, and also they're required to pay for, from the employer's standpoint, is all the welding personal protective equipment they're going to need to do that job in a safe manner. This is what the employers are not required to pay for. Once again, non-specialty safety protective footwear, including steel toes, steel shoes, or even steel-toed boots, and other non-specialty prescription safety eyewear, provided that the employer meets such items to be worn off the job site. In other words, if you wear it at work, but your employer allows you to take it home or wear it home, they do not have to pay for it then. OSHA bases its decision on the fact that this type of equipment is very personal. It's often used outside of the workplace. The other thing, too, is that it is taken by workers from the job site, employers basically to the employer. And the other thing, too, is everyday clothing such as, and they do give you some examples of these on there, long sleeve shirts, long pants, street clothes, street shoes, and also normal work boots. That's what the employer is not required to pay for. Other things, too, they're not required to pay for is ordinary clothing, the skin creams, other items used solely for protection from weather, such as winter coats, jackets, gloves, parkas, rubber boots, hats, raincoats, ordinary sunglasses, and sunscreen. Lifting belts, because the value in protecting the belt is questionable. When the employee has lost or intentionally damaged the PPE, it must be replaced. And that's where the employer does not have to pay for it. So, like I said, just kind of take note of your PPE requirements and make sure you take care of what you have. If for some reason you do elect to wear a respirator voluntarily, okay, only filtering face piece masks, such as a dust mask, can be used on a voluntary basis here at Oklahoma State University. All other respirators require medical evaluation, a fit test, and, of course, training. Members wanting to use a filtering face piece device on a voluntary basis must complete the OSU approval form and training. That's some of the requirements we have here at Oklahoma State University. Here's what the voluntary use of respirator information looks like right here. You put the department name at the very top up there. The respirators are an effective method to protect against designated hazards when properly selected and worn. Sometimes workers may wear respirators to provide exposures to hazards, even if the amount of hazardous substance does not exceed the limits set by OSHA. So that's where it turns into a voluntary use there as well. So the exception is employers are not required to include in a written respiratory program those employees who only use a respirator involves voluntary use of filtering face pieces, such as dust mask. Just a few takeaways. We did review the PPE standards for both, basically from the head all the way to the bottom of the feet of the individual. We covered the standards for that portion of it. We also talked about the hierarchy of control. We covered that. Also introduced you how to do a job hazard analysis. And we also discussed different types of protection, different types of PPE that's out there, different types of safety glasses, safety goggles. Employer's responsibilities. That's very straightforward, is what we put out there. Here's some facts and questions a lot of times people will bring up. The first one we ran across is my employer required to pay for safety footwear? And the answer to that is what? No, they are not, because that's something they consider you can wear to your home. Now, If your employer makes you leave that safety footwear at the job site, then they're required to provide you with um, monetary means for the footwear. Do nitrile gloves provide protection for every chemical? And the answer to that is no, it does not. You've got to go back and take the time to figure out what your chemicals are you're using, read up on the updated safety data sheets for that particular product, and the other most important thing is select from what the safety data sheet recommends those type of gloves, because that's going to protect you if you happen to have exposure to whatever chemical you may be using. How often should personal protective equipment be inspected? At the beginning and throughout the work job task. Make sure you're always looking at your personal protective equipment and make sure it is in good shape. What do I do with my broken personal protective equipment? Do us a favor, cut it up as small as you possibly can, let your supervisor know, and then they can figure out how they want you to go about disposal of that particular personal protective equipment that needs to be repaired. What we don't want to happen is it winds up back out there with another individual or groups of people, and from that point forward, they have defective equipment, and they're not really getting any protection associated with that particular product. Can I supply my own personal protective equipment? And the answer is what? You can, but you do have to meet what? Fill out specific information that the employer is required to have. That once again, you're going to supply your own PPE for the job task that you're going to be doing. So always keep that in mind, please. All right, it has been a pleasure. I do thank y'all for listening in today. These are just some of the programs that the Oklahoma State University Environmental Health and Safety Department provides. We can provide fire protection engineering, life safety, and emergency preparedness. We also provide environmental compliance, the lab safety, occupational safety, occupational health and medical surveillances, materials management, industrial hygiene, chemical hygiene, and safety training. Those are everything that our department here at Oklahoma State is responsible for and overseeing, and actually providing a safe work environment for the employees who work here. With that said, I do thank you all for watching today. Everybody have a safe and wonderful day, and I do thank you.